Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to all our viewers throughout the world on TorahAnytime.com. We got a lot to do tonight. So first off, I just want to make a comment about the coronavirus. First of all, if anybody feels under the weather, please do not come. I don't want to be blunt or rude, but I'm not wearing a mask, and so no sneezing, no coughing, all right, okay. Listen, you're supposed to be a very sharing and generous and caring person, right? Sharing, but don't share germs. Keep it to yourself, okay? That much, you can be selfish about that. Be selfish with your germs. Don't share the germs, okay? Unfortunately, we don't want anything that's communicative or contagious or viral. So what's interesting is that many attribute the origins of the coronavirus actually to a place in China. Anybody know what it's called? It starts with a W? Wuhan. Yeah. Is that a city? Is that a town?
Military
it's a city. Yeah. Right. Okay, so Wuhan, China. So what happens is that they actually have a festival over there, which is part of commerce, where they display and exhibit and sell wildlife. And the Chinese people are very gastronomical. Can you imagine there's a people more gastronomical than Jews? We thought that Jews like to eat, but they really like to eat, and they eat things of all flavors and varieties, all types of specimens and creatures, to the extent that what they exhibit at this festival is all types of wildlife that's even very exotic, and that is not commonplace at all. So bats, porcupines, boar. There's also, as a matter of fact, some say that the coronavirus, there's a dispute whether it came from the bat or whether it came from the snake. And these are all delicacies for the Chinese. Now, there was a woman who was interviewed recently by the news outlets about why they are fixated, why they have this obsession with this type of wildlife. And she said something very interesting. She said that we don't want to be interfered with. We don't want to stop having this wildlife as our diet or culinary choice. She said, because when you eat this type of wildlife, our theory, and this is like almost like their ideology or theology, whatever you want to call it, is that they absorb within their physiology now, they absorb the traits, their characteristics, where if you eat something that's ferocious or eat something that is resilient, you develop those tendencies within you. So why wouldn't you want those attributes or those characteristics within you? That's one thing she said. And the other thing she said is that it happens to be, it's a status. Because when you invite somebody, let's say a compatriot or a colleague, and you want to take somebody out on a business date or a business meeting, so instead of just going, for just regular lo mein, regular Chinese food, like dim sum or wonton or lo mein or chont, I'm sorry, chont is not Chinese food, okay. So you'll take them out to eat a snake or a raccoon, things like that. And then that's something that's a wow factor. Oh, that's very prestigious. It's impressive, and you impress a person, and it's a status. So I was thinking that both these ideas, both these concepts, are so antithetical, and so really anathema to Judaism, because Judaism is the precise. We're diametrically opposed to any notion like that. Judaism says you have to eat foods where the animals are more sedate, where they're more tranquil, where they're more placid, where they're more calm. Because you're only allowed to eat domesticated animals, and the domesticated animals are not allowed to be animals of prey. That means that they're not allowed to go to synagogue and pray too much, okay? No. They have to not be animals of prey, where P-R-E-Y, where they prey upon other animals. Because an animal that preys upon other animals means that the animal will be callous. And it becomes an animal that develops that it doesn't have the nicest, kindness and personality. Therefore, we only eat animals that are more gentle animals, such as, of course, sheep and goats and cows. As a matter of fact, according to Jewish law, there are 10 animals that are allowed for us to consume. 3 of them are domesticated animals and 7 are non-domesticated animals, more wild animals. means that you don't find them in your backyard necessarily. But the three, of course, bovine, cattle, the three domestic animals you allowed to eat, of course, are sheep, goats, and cows. And the non-domestic animals are gazelle and buffalo, giraffe are kosher. For those that are not familiar, giraffe are kosher. And some of the animals, the 7 non-domestic animals, were not 100% their identity. But the deer, yes, venison is kosher. Giraffe is called a zemer, and the reason why it's called zemer is because zemer means song, and the giraffe produces, it actually seems to be a mute, although it's not mute, but it's a pseudonym or a euphemism for the fact that since it doesn't produce sound, it's called zemer, which means sound. So it's a euphemism, but a giraffe certainly does make sound. It's called infrasonic sound. You can't detect, it's not the human being can't detect it, but of course others could detect it. Well, all these animals are considered to be, in some way, they're considered to be animals that don't have bad personality traits or characteristics, and therefore you are what you eat. You become what you eat. And Judaism is very, very critical about like that you have to be careful what you eat, because you do become what you eat. And therefore the diet in Judaism gives us discipline. There's nothing more important for a human being, and that's what the Torah is really all about. You want to know what the Torah is encapsulated in a nutshell? It's about discipline. Because every person needs discipline. If you're not having discipline, it means you're not being a human being. You're being an animal. An animal doesn't need discipline. And the truth is, even an animal sometimes knows how to have the appropriate discipline. So certainly, how much more so does a human being have to have discipline? And it's very, very important for an animal to have, for a human being to have discipline, and therefore we eat certain things. So therefore, that's why it's for a human being to eat things that, give it the wrong traits is contrary to the Torah. And also things about status. Oh, we're going out to the restaurant to have to eat a lion, right? Because the lion has that element of courage and bravado and ferocity. That's not what we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to be about arrogance. We're not supposed to be status. We're supposed to be humble. That's what the Torah wants us to be. We're supposed to develop, and we have to work on it. God despises arrogance. As a matter of fact, when it comes to choosing a doctor, and this is Rav Steinman, the great Rabbi Steinman, passed away 3 years ago at around 104 years old. And anybody that follows the bi-weekly Wednesday lecture on Torah Anytime, they may have heard me say this, but if you have to choose a physician, how do you choose a physician? So Rabbi Steinman was asked about a religious Jew who was world-renowned, very competent doctor, not only competent, but he's listed in who's who in doctors and physicians, versus a secular Jewish doctor who's not so renowned, but the Jewish religious doctor is bombastic, he's arrogant, and the secular Jewish doctor is humble. Who should you choose? And he said, don't go with the religious doctor, go with the irreligious doctor if he's humble. Because God despises arrogance. And that's very, very important. Hashem wants us to be humble. He wants us to understand that everyone is created in the divine image of God, not just you. And you have to understand that God doesn't discriminate. Every human being God put the divine image into. So what makes you better than someone else if you're both in the divine image of God? My chazes, why is your blood redder than someone else? And it's very, very important to realize. Okay, now let's go to the Torah. This Saturday, this Shabbat, is a very important Shabbat. Thank you so much, Sean. A special welcome back to Sean all the way from the Holy Land. So happy to have you back. Now, very important to realize that this Saturday, there's 2 readings. Normally we take out the Torah from the Ark. Every week we read from the Torah portion in order to get inspiration for the week, in order to get enlightenment for the week, in order to get our blueprint, our guidepost, how to conduct ourselves for the week. Inspiration for the week, we take out the Torah. There are 54 portions in the Torah, 54 Torah portions. Every week is another one. This week we're going to read from 2 Torah portions, because this week it's the only time the Bible actually tells you that you have to read from the Torah. The other times it's rabbinically charged to read from the Torah. This one is called Zachor, which means remember. God charges us to remember the evil of Amalek. Amalek was the personification, the epitome of evil. He was the one, when the Jewish people were in the desert and they were vulnerable, they had just been rescued from the tentacles of the Egyptians. The Egyptians were in hot pursuit over the Jews. The Egyptians were drowned with the splitting of the sea. And now God is choosing them as his favorite people, as his chosen people. And everyone else is intimidated by the Jewish people. Everyone else is paranoid and petrified to touch the Jewish people. But there's one nation that has the audacity, the gall, to try to tamper with the Jewish people. It's Amalek. Amalek is evil. They were savage. They were brute. They were despicable people that did things to their own children, that would engage in child sacrifice and kill their own children. And God says Amalek has to be eradicated, because Amalek has no fear of God. They're atheists, and Amalek is capable of doing the most heinous and horrid, perpetrating the worst things in the world. And therefore Amalek has to be destroyed. And therefore even though we are very peace-loving with Jewish people, we're not pacifists, because there are times we realize that we do have to engage in self-defense, and sometimes even we have to engage in preemptive strike to defend ourselves. We're not pacifists, but we're very, very peace-loving. And we believe that shalom, peace, is paramount. As a matter of fact, we speak about shalom in all our liturgy. Whether it's the grace after meals, after eating, it concludes with shalom. Whether it's the meditative prayer of the 18 blessings, Shmon Esrei, it ends, which we do 3 times a day, it ends with shalom. Whether it's a Talmud, the Mishnah, it ends with shalom, peace. Peace is everything. If you don't have peace, as Rashi says, famous commentary of Rashi, where he says, Em ein shalom, ein klum. If you don't have peace, you could have all the money in the world. You could have the best of health. But if you don't have peace in your life, you have nothing. It's valueless. And that's a very, very important lesson, because there are people walking around with acrimony. There are people walking around with tempers. There are people walking around that have grudges and that are not at peace with their family members. God wants you to have peace more than anything. He wants siblings to love one another. He wants spouses to love one another. He wants parents and children to love one another. Shalom is so important. And therefore it comes as a total surprise that God, who loves peace and wants the Jewish people to be the most peaceful people, the paragons and paradigm of peace in the world, he says, I want you to take a certain people and obliterate, destroy them. Because these people, genetically, in their genes, they inculcated into their children a hatred. You say, well, how's that possible? Look at the Palestinians today. From infancy, from toddlerhood, they brainwash and program their children to engage in destruction. And this is something that they're imbued with. This is something you cannot ferret out. And you say, well, let's just take the parents. It doesn't work, because it propagates and it becomes viral and it becomes endemic and genetic. It's very, very scary. And therefore, God says at least once a year you have to do zachar. You have to remember that there's evil in the world. You have to identify, don't be a liberal who says that every person, there's no such thing as evil. That's a wrong mentality. That is antithetical to Judaism. We say that as much as you're supposed to respect every person and value every person, we recognize that there are people that are evil. We dread the fact that they're evil, and we don't like the fact that there's evil, and we pray that the evil should disappear, but there is evil. And therefore, once a year, before the holiday of Purim, when we read about the attempted genocide against the Jewish people from Iran, the same Iran, same place, maybe they're descendants, I don't know, but the same Iran that they declared, I think it was a few days ago, it was discovered that they actually are super, super close to having a nuclear bomb. That same Iran, thousands of years ago, Persia, they decided that they're going to wipe out, exterminate the Jewish people. The head demagogue was Haman. The king was Ahasuerus. And they plotted this evil decree against the Jewish people. So right before Purim, on Sabbath, when everyone's gathered together, we say Zachar. Timcha es Zecher Malach, that you're incumbent upon you, you're mandated, you have a moral obligation to destroy Amalek. Now today, we don't know for sure who Amalek is. Is it something that is genetic? Does he have to actually stem and emanate genealogically from Amalek, or is it ideological? The Brisker Rav held, Rav Zev Soloveitchik held, Rav Belvo held, that it's ideological. That as long as somebody espouses a virulent and diabolical hatred against the Jewish people, then they are Amalek. They don't have to be related blood from Amalek. We don't know for sure. And we're not allowed to go ahead and become, the NRA champions and say, well, let's go ahead and have guns and shoot up every, God forbid. Because Mashiach didn't come yet and identify for us for certain who Amalek is. When Mashiach comes, we will have obligation to destroy evil. Now, what's fascinating is when the Torah says that you have to destroy Amalek, it says like this. Ki macho emche means erase, I shall erase, as zecher Amalek, the remembrance of Amalek, mitachas hashamayim, from under the heavens. Under the heavens is more like an idiom. It's more of, let's say, I guess, a metaphor. It means from the entire world. That will come a day when God says, macho emche, I shall erase. Now, what's fascinating is that, remember, the Torah is multilateral. The Torah can be understood on a superficial level, but it's very, very profound. There is a very deep, anybody that thinks that the Torah could just be understood, exclusively understood on a superficial level, that's such a misconception. And it's so wrong, because the Torah doesn't come from a mortal. Certainly, you think about it, kavachomer v'kol shekain, which means how much more so. If people sit there hundreds of years later and analyzing and meta-analyzing Shakespeare, right? I remember, you take college courses and they sit there, I was like, this is ridiculous. They're sitting, in a college course where they're analyzing, whether it's Shakespeare or, some other author, and like it's like the most holy thing, how much more so you analyze, you understand that there's a deeper meaning to God's word. This doesn't come from a man. Torah wasn't created by a man. Thank God for those that know. We just, we had a bris, we had a circumcision here on Sunday. A young man in his 30s, had his bris. Never was able to be circumcised. He was born in Russia, grew up as a Jew here in Brooklyn, went to Brooklyn College, and we had a beautiful ceremony for him. What's fascinating, is that, people say, well, how do I know the Torah was written by God? Maybe it came from man. And why in the world would a man ask somebody to go ahead and think about it. A man would say, give me your taxes, right? He wants to be the Lord over you. Give me your taxes, do this, do that, do this, do that. But to mutilate your body, what do you get out of that? Nothing. God says it starts making sense. God says, do it on the 8th day. How fascinating is it that on the 8th day, that's when the baby is able to coagulate the blood. Not the baby doesn't do it, it happens naturally. But think about it. If you give a baby a circumcision anytime before the 8th day, the baby bleeds to death. Even if it's not a hemophiliac, it bleeds to death because the blood can't yet coagulate. When does vitamin K come in? Remember, there's prothrombin, vitamin K. When does vitamin K come in and spike? Just at that precise moment. No mortal, almost 4,000 years, can know that. Unless he went ahead and slaughtered millions of babies and experimented, there's no record of that at all, right? It's impossible. So God knew that. This comes from God. So therefore you have to understand, if it comes from God, it's God's instruction book. The same way when you go to the store and you buy yourself an iPhone, or if you buy yourself, a Bluetooth, whatever you buy yourself, it comes with some kind of manual, right? So we also have a manual. We're no different than a food processor that you're going to buy that comes with a manual. Our manual, our instruction book for life, is this book, the Torah. Torah means Torah, it means instructions. That's what it means, an instruction book for life. So, if you're going to say that every word is just the way, it meets the eye, that is disparaging the law of God. So let's analyze it now. You ready? Ki macho emche. What's hidden in these words? Ki macho emche, I will erase. Who would be the man that would try to attempt for the first time in the history of the world the greatest genocide against the Jewish people? Bernie Sanders? What? I think he would do it if he had his choice. The guy's crazy, right? I don't know, No, it wasn't Bernie Sanders. Who am I talking about? Haman, right? Hitler, Haman, they almost sound alike, right? Haman though, right? Haman. So listen to this. Emche, I will erase. Encoded in this word is the person who was a descendant. He was a genealogical, his pedigree was traced directly to Amalek, Haman. Guess what? In the word Emche, Aleph, Mem, Ches, Hey, Aleph is 1, Mem is 40, Ches is 8, and Hey is 5. How much is that? 54. 54. Emche. You look at the Megillah, the scroll of Esther. How many times does the word Haman show up in the scroll of Esther? 54 times. Emche. Who will I erase? Who will God erase? It's encoded right there. Jewish history, the future that the world will see. Everything is leka davar shelo remizu b'araisa. There's nothing that's not encoded or eluded or encrypted in the Torah. Everything is there, the secrets of the Torah. You know that? Not even in the Torah. But the book that comes closest to the Torah, you won't believe it, in the book of Tanakh, which are 24 books of the Torah, the book that comes closest to the actual Bible is the book of Esther. Because it says that of all those other books, the other books, they will all become second fiddle in the time of Messiah. Because those prophecies, all prophecies, will pale and be eclipsed and be superseded by the prophecies of Mashiach, except for one book. One book will never, ever, it says, take second place, and that is the book of Esther. The book of Esther is a very, very holy book, and the laws of the Megillah Esther actually are similar to the laws of the actual Torah of the 5 books of Moses. So listen, you know what's amazing? Is at one time, somebody said, well, how do I know? Where is the entire story of Esther, who was the heroine, not the drug heroine, okay? The heroine, the hero, the female hero. Where do I know that she is, where does she show up in the Chumash? If everything is in here. Listen to this, you ready? There was a great rabbi who was known as Rabbi Michal Ber Weissmandel, a rabbi from Slovakia. Anybody know where Slovakia is? Where it was? Well, the border's always changing in Eastern Europe, right? It's very hard to identify precisely, right? Near Poland, yeah. Right, well, technically, yeah. So, so Rabbi Weissmandel had tremendous foresight. And he saw the Third Reich. He saw the coming of the Nazis. And he was very, very, very fearful and very concerned. He trained his students how to jump off cattle cars, out of the trains. He said one day the Nazis, the Germans, will round up people and put them in trains. I want you to practice how to jump off to save your lives. And this is what he would do. He was the one, Rabbi Weissmandel, that attempted to bribe the Nazis. He raised money to bribe the Nazis. He saved numerous Jews. As a matter of fact, when he finally made it to America, because he was faced with the greatest conundrum and dilemma that no one should ever be faced with, when he and his family were rounded up by the Nazis and put on the cattle cars. You know what happened? Dylan, you hear what happened? Yeah. This rabbi and his family were rounded up and put on the cattle cars to go to Auschwitz. And he had a young wife, young children. They didn't know how to jump off the cattle cars. They couldn't. They didn't have this physical dexterity, maybe, to do it. And he was able to do it. And he didn't know. What should he do? He could jump off. Should he jump off and save his life while they go to Auschwitz, or should he accompany them to Auschwitz? Should he live, survive them, outlive them, or should he die with them? And again, it's a dilemma that no one should ever have to face. In the end, he said that if I live, perhaps I could still save them. This is my new chance that I could save them. And he decided that he would jump off the cattle car at high speed. He jumped off, he got injured. And somehow, it may have been Elijah the prophet, somebody helped him. And he was in a barn, saved by peasants, Gentiles, in a barn. And in the barn, he was hiding there for a long time. And he could have gone insane. You know, we have a brilliant mind. He was a brilliant man, hiding in the barn. How do you stay busy? So what he did was he had a photographic memory. He knew the entire Torah by heart. And somehow in his pockets he had, remember when you studied math, maybe in high school, even elementary school, maybe junior high school, remember there were special papers called?
Cheat sheets?
No. No, I would. You think I would talk about cheat sheets, huh? Like, yeah, grid, graph paper. So he had, and what he did was, he wrote the entire Torah. He wrote the Torah down. And he started finding mystical codes in the Torah. This was the forerunner to the Bible codes, to the Torah codes. In a barn, hiding from the Nazis, grieving over his family's death, he came up with the Bible codes. When he came to America, he was so devastated because he lost his family, but more so, he was brokenhearted because he tried so valiantly to save the Jewish people, and there were other Jewish people that were not religious that refused to give him money for bribery money. And he could never get over it, and unfortunately, his heart was broken, and he sustained a heart attack here in America and passed away in Nitra, New York. But Rabbi Weissmandel, listen to this amazing thing. Rabbi Weissmandel showed a certain code. He said, if you look at the Megillah, Esther, it's amazing. You will find that if you count the letters, if I'm not mistaken, I think there are, in Megillah Esther, there are, just to verify, it doesn't say it here, I think there are 167 verses. There are 12,000, he said, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 12,119 letters. He said if you go to the first Aleph, the first letter Aleph, in the Bible, in the Torah, it is the third letter of the Torah, Beis Reish Aleph, the Aleph of Bereshis is the third letter, and you count 12,119 letters hence, you get to a Samach. And then if you count another 12,119 letters, you get to a Saf, Tuf. And then if you count another 12,119 letters, you get to a Reish, which spells, of course, Esther. Then he said that if you go to the Mem, where Mordechai is alluded to in the Torah, and you count from the Mem another 12,119 letters, you get to a Reish. You count another 12,119 letters, you get to a Daled. You count another 12,119 letters, you get to a Chaf. You count another 12,119 letters, you get to Shon. No, just go. You get to Yud. And it spells Mordechai. This is an amazing code, which shows you the correlation. It shows you the interface. It shows you the amazing symmetry and synchrony in the Torah. But it goes further. Because you see that the word Emche, 54, because Haman appears 54 times in the Torah. But there's something else. Because the word Emche, Kimocho Emche, I will erase. Who will I engage? Who will I delegate to erase the evil in the world? You know who? The Mashiach. Who was the first Mashiach in the world? Who was the first Mashiach? Moses. Moshe was the first Mashiach. And who was his colleague? Who assisted him? Aaron. Whose older brother. So, the Vilna Gaon says something amazing. He says in the word Emche, which means I will vanquish, I will destroy, I will erase. It means I will hire the Mashiach to do it. All the Mashiachs throughout history. Aleph, Mem, Ches, Hey. Aleph is Aaron. Mem is Moshe. Ches is Chur. Chur was their associate, who was Miriam's son, who helped Aaron and Moshe. And then Hey, of course, is Hashem. Further in history, the attempted genocide against the entire Jewish world, because Achashverosh was a leading monarch, and he reigned over the entire civilized world. It means all the Jews were in jeopardy. They were all subject to peril, to devastation. Who saved the Jewish people from Haman, from Haman? Who?
Mordechai.
And who?
Esther.
Good. Aleph, Esther, Mem, Mordechai. Says the Gemara in Sukkah Daf Nun Beis. Oh, 1 second please, I'm sorry. That's for later. Says the Gemara in Megillah on Daf Tezayin, if I'm not mistaken, that Charvona, there was a man named Charvona. He saved the Jewish people. Who was Charvona? Chavona is mentioned 2 times in the scroll of Esther. The first time Chavona is mentioned is in the very beginning of Esther. I'll read it to you so you don't doubt it. Everything is authenticated here. In the very beginning, chapter 1 of the book of Esther, what does it say? It says,
Kept the records. Recorded it.
it's coming up. It's interesting because if you look at it, it's spelled Chavona. It's in Pasuk Yud, chapter 1, verse 10. By Yom HaShvi, who's on the 7th day of the king's party, Ketov Lev HaMelech Bayayin, when King Achashverosh, the Persian king, was drunk. Amar L'Muhuman Bizazar Chavona. He said he ordered all his cabinet ministers, and one of them's name was Chavona. Okay, now Chavona resurfaces later on in the Megillah, towards the end, when Achashverosh is in privacy with Haman, and Haman goes ahead, and all of a sudden he's almost laying on the couch right next to Esther, and Achashverosh becomes irate, and he says, "Oh, what are you doing?" He gets all angry at Haman, right? And then this guy, Chavona, surfaces out of nowhere, right? And he's like, by the way, Achashverosh, you think Haman's bad? Let me tell you how really bad he is. Do you know that he erected a gallows to hang your best friend, the one that saved you, Mordechai? What? Off with his head! He will be hung instead! That's Chavona. So Chavona is known to be part of the Mashiach of Esther Mordechai. Interesting is in the Farshim point that Chasam Sofer says that the first time Chavona is mentioned, his name is spelled with an aleph at the end. The second time is Hey. Why? You won't believe it. Because who was Chavona? Chavona was a Gentile, right? He was a Persian, Iranian. No. The first time he's mentioned, yes, he was a cabinet minister of the king. But the second time, he's Elijah the prophet. In the guise of, for some reason, but we don't know, Elijah the prophet chooses Chavona to take on his, they used to have like in these, probably in the movies or something, where they had these guys that were working for the secret intelligence, and they would put on these face masks that blended in so, right? It was almost like, they went to these makeup artists, right? And they had these face masks that just seamlessly blended into their faces, right? So Elijah the prophet did that with Chavona, except he could do it mystically and metaphysically. He doesn't have to go to a makeup artist. And so Chasam Sofer explains that when you have a secular name, a non-Hebrew name, that becomes transliterated, then you end it with an aleph. Like the word Chanina, Akiva, ends with an aleph. He says, when it's not the Hebrew. But when it turns Hebrew, it's a Hey. He says, so since in the second occurrence, Chavona was a Jew, Eliyahu, that's why the second occurrence, it's mentioned with a Hey. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Now, Chavona saves the day. And that's why we say, V'gam Chavona zachur latov, that Chavona will be remembered for good, because even though technically he wasn't Jewish, he's known as a Mashiach because he went ahead and he was a Makah B'Patish. He was the final hammer blow that did Haman in. So Haman should be hung on the gallows and executed in an electric chair with lethal injection and killed. And by the way, anytime somebody goes ahead and says something nice about somebody, so the custom is amongst Jewish people, say, V'gam chavona zachur latov. It means that if you go ahead and you say something nice about somebody, you're like the redeeming factor that may have put that person on a pedestal or saved that person's reputation. You're known, V'gam chavona zachur latov. So the second time in history that we had Mashiach, Emche, God promises, I will erase. Who's going to erase under my auspices? Who's going to facilitate for me? Esther, Mordechai, Chavona, and Hashem. But there's a last time that we're waiting for right now. Who's going to be the last ones to take away all evil in the world?
What evil are we facing?
Who? Us?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, who asked that? Josh?
Yeah.
You tell me, what evil is in the world?
No.
You don't know what evil in the world?
Not now, not now.
Really?
We have Israel.
You don't think that Hamas is evil, or
100%.
Al Qaeda, or ISIS, or Iran? There's a lot. Palestinians. There's a lot of evil in the world. Islamic Jihad, and who knows what. Okay, there's a lot of evil. There's a lot of evil. So what's gonna happen? So listen to this amazing code. You won't believe this. No mortal could have thought of this. It's in right here. Emche. Aleph Mem Chesed is, Aleph is Elijah, Eliyahu. Mem is Mashiach. Ches, the Talmud in Sukkot, Nun Bey says that Mashiach and Eliyahu will be surrounded by 8 princes. 8 princes. And of course, Hey is Hashem. It's all in this one word. Could you imagine? This is epic. This is monumental. All in one word you have contained Aleph Mem Ches Hey. Aleph Mem Ches Hey. 4 letters. You have an entire spectrum. You have an entire vista. You have an entire past, present, and future merging together. I mean, that's astounding. Aleph Mem Ches Hey. In 4 letters, you have so much. So much. Wow. But it goes further. Because Macho Emche, erase I shall erase, is Gematria 107, which is the Gematria of Magen David, Magen David. It means the shield of David. Because who is going to be the one in the end of days to eradicate evil? It will be the progeny, the descendant of David. David's shield, 107, Magen David. But it goes even further. It's even deeper. Because Anochi Yud Kei Vav Kei. Anochi. It says that the name of God is incomplete. The name of God is incomplete until Mashiach comes. Then God's name is complete again, right? God's name is complete again when Mashiach comes. Which name of God is complete? The Yud Hey Vav Hey. And that's why Anochi Yud Kei Vav Kei, I become Yud Kei Vav Kei again, is Gematria Macho Emche. Ki Yod Al Keis Ka. Because until Mashiach comes, God's name is deficient, is bereft. It's only Yud Kei, it's not Vav Kei. Anochi Yud Kei Vav Kei, Macho Emche. Okay, let's go further now. In the story of Purim, when Esther is told, shh, okay, when Esther is told about the diabolical decree that the Jews will be exterminated like rodents, so what is her reaction? What does she say? It's not a physical, she doesn't say arm yourselves. She understands that there's a spiritual cause here. You understand that? It's very, very important. The Jew doesn't, this is a Jewish philosophy. The Jew understands that there's underpinnings. There's a foundation behind things. And when the Jew is threatened, he understands that he has to engage in introspection and retrospection of what is my spirit. And therefore, what does Esther say? Lech kenos es kol Yehudim. Go gather the Jewish people that are found in Shushan. V'sumu alai, and fast for me. Do not eat. Al tochlu v'al tishtu, not eat or drink. Shloshes yomim, 3 days, Laila v'yom, night and day. Can you imagine, let's say, God forbid, I want you to think about this. Dylan, you hear this? Listen to this. You ready? Let's say, God forbid, 1,000,000 times. The Khamenei from Iran says that he threatens that it's verified and that there's actually a nuclear bomb that could subject the entire Israel to ruination, to devastation. What would be our reaction? So imagine if we were ordered by... Now Esther, you have to understand, the Talmud tells us in Megillah, Daf Yudalad, page 14, that Esther was a prophetess and Mordechai was a prophet. So imagine somebody of the caliber of maybe Rabbi Kanievsky, who's in Bnei Brak in Israel, says, and he's obviously not a prophet, but he's a great sage and great scholar who has probably divine knowledge, and he says, I want all the Jewish people to fast for 3 days. I hope that never happens, because I don't know, it's going without food for 3 days, but that's what happened. If you were living in Persia a few thousand years ago, and you were under the terrible, terrible decree of the Persians then, every Jew had to fast for 3 days. The problem with this is that the Talmud tells us that one of those days coincided with none other than Passover. Passover. Which is very troubling, halachically, according to Jewish law. Why is it troubling? Because on Passover, we are commanded that we must eat matzah. As a matter of fact, it's the only time we're actually commanded by the Bible to eat something is matzah. You have to eat it. So here's a question. How in the world could the Jewish people abstain? This is the first time in history, and the only time in history, that the Jewish people, they took a vacation from Passover. No Passover. They did not have the matzah. They didn't have a Paschal lamb because they weren't living in Israel. They were living in the diaspora, living in the exile. But they were fasting. So how does that work? How do you suspend a law? How do you do such a thing? So the Talmud says, the Gemara says, that something very interesting. And that is that the rabbis were empowered by the Torah itself to teach the people that as long as they are withdrawing from something, as long as they are abstaining from something, they're not doing something proactive, but they're refraining from doing something, and it's for the sake of a mitzvah, the rabbis are allowed to charge you to do that. What's one of the great primary examples? Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year. Jewish New Year is very, very holy. So in Jewish New Year, you're supposed to blow from the trumpet, like it's not a trumpet, it's a shofar, right? From the horns ram. Right? Supposed to blow it. Let me ask you a question. Did you ever see a shofar blown? Let's say Rosh Hashanah coincides with Saturday, with Sabbath. Did you ever see a shofar blown on the Sabbath? No. Why not? The rabbis came along and the rabbis said, you're not allowed to do it. What do you mean you're not allowed to do it? The Torah says you do it. The Torah never makes an exception for the Sabbath and it doesn't say that, well, on Sabbath you're not allowed to blow the shofar. The rabbis were afraid that since carrying is a problem on Sabbath, you may come to carry the shofar. You may, instead of just leaving the synagogue, you may bring it to your house, then bring it to the synagogue, bring it to shul, and you're carrying on Shabbos, and therefore the rabbi said that it's very, very severe to carry on the Sabbath, for whatever the reason, you're not supposed to carry on the Sabbath, and better to stop the shofar blowing, that everybody should just relax and withdraw and refrain, than come to possible commission of this severe sin of carrying the Sabbath. What's another example? Anybody know? What's another example of this? Baruch, what's another example of this? Oh, but that's the exception. You're allowed to do, because circumcision is so paramount to Judaism, and it's so important, we don't say that we're afraid that somebody will carry the knife for the circumcision. That's the exception. But what?
We don't carry an Esther.
Exactly. He got it. We don't carry a lulav, right? Remember, we shake the lulav of the 4 species on Sukkot. On Saturday, we don't do it, even though the Torah says to do it. The rabbi said, don't hold off, don't do it. So the law is, as long as the rabbis are telling you not to do something, and it's safeguarding a law, then you're allowed to listen. You have to listen, because it's safeguarding an even more important law. Shev v'al ta'aseh. Shev means sit, v'al ta'aseh. Not kum v'eseh, not get up and do something, but shev v'al ta'aseh, retreat. Shev v'al ta'aseh, retreat, withdraw, don't do it. So, the Mefarshim say something amazing. This is what the Mefarshim say. The Mefarshim say that in this case, Esther made a calculation. And Esther made a very interesting calculation. She said, listen, if we don't do something right now, drastic, then the Jewish people will, God forbid, be annihilated. We have to do something drastic. She said, what works? What works more than weapons and artillery? What works more than anything is when the Jewish people repair themselves spiritually. When they mend their ways and return to the source, and they return to behaving like Jewish people should. And part of that process is engaging in penitence, repentance, prayer, but also fasting. Because fasting reminds us that we're not just physical. If we were just physical, we wouldn't have the gift of being able to articulate. We wouldn't be able to, we have a larynx, we have vocal cords, right? We have a trachea, but animals also do. But there's something special about the human being, that we could actually talk, coherent, that we could articulate. And this is something that's spiritual. There's something so we're not just physical beings. We're not just sophisticated primates. If we were sophisticated primates, we wouldn't be the only bipedal, we wouldn't be the only two-legged creatures that could stand erect. There's something different about us. Right? Because the animal always gravitates towards the earth, because it always reverts back to its strictly earth. We aspire to the heavens. That's why we stand straight, because we show that we go to the firmaments. There's something more profound about us. Right? If we were just animals, we wouldn't blush. No animal blushes. Only human being blushes. There's something special about us. So to remind us that we're not just physical. A physical entity needs food. A spiritual entity doesn't need food. To remind us that we're also spiritual. That we have this profundity to us. Therefore, we don't eat. And therefore, Esther said, you have to abstain from eating for 3 days. And she said, I don't command you to do that. You have to do something drastic. Even if it means take away the mitzvah of Passover. Because this is for the vitality. This is for the eternity. This is for the perpetuity of the Jewish people. And therefore I'm allowed to tell you to withdraw. Who is she to do that? In order to, the Gemara says, the Talmud says, you need a Beit Din. You need an entire Jewish court to do that, like a Sanhedrin. So the Mefarshim say, but no, since she was a Neviah, she was a prophetess, and he was a Navi, Mordechai. Therefore, in lieu of a Sanhedrin, a Navi or a Neviah is allowed to substitute for a Sanhedrin and give this mandate, and promulgate this law. 1 second. They couldn't do it any other time? You have to miss Passover? I mean, everybody knows the Passover, you have so much matzah, that's why you have to have the prune juice, right? Right? It's the declaration of constipation, right? That's what Passover is all about, right? So imagine a year where there's no matzah. What's going on here? So I want to explain to you that what the Aruch LaNer speaks about this. The Aruch LaNer has a fascinating interpretation, where he says that when it says, "V'tsumo alai, fast for me. V'al tochlu v'al tishtu, do not eat, do not drink. Shloshes yomim, 3 days. Now, first of all, could a human being go without drink for 3 days? No, for that you have to ask, is it possible? What?
I'm pretty sure 5 days is max.
Without any water.
Without any water.
I mean, but then how do you get, 1 second, think about the sodium potassium pump, the ions in the body, dehydration. I mean, I don't know if, without any water whatsoever. Does that make sense?
Possibly.
I don't know. 3 days without anything. So the Aruch LaNer says that when it says Laila v'yom, it doesn't mean it was incessant, consecutive, that they broke. In between the day and the night, they were able to have something.
So then you matzah.
What? So then they had the matzah. That's all right? That's the matzah. However,
The matzah is at night. The Seder is at night anyway.
A night. However, there's another interpretation. This is what the Yaros Devash, the great Rabbi Yonoson Eibushits, who was a great mystic. We're going back now to the 18th century of Jewish people. Rabbi Yonoson Eibushits was the tremendous rabbi of Altoona, and a great, preeminent scholar and sage and mystic. Rabbi Yonoson Eibushits says something fascinating. He says, at this point in history, now we know that there are many fasts throughout the year for Jewish people. By the way, fasting is not bad. As a matter of fact, they've done studies in laboratories with rats that shows that caloric restriction, that refraining from eating, could help with longevity, could help you live longer. So when we Jews have this, this recurrent fasting, it's actually good for us. We're able to basically replenish our bodies, and rejuvenate in a certain sense. But at this point, remember, the Purim story, when did it occur? It happened between the first and second temples. It was after the destruction of the first temple. At that stage, how many fasts were there for the Jewish people?
Yom Kippur.
Just one. Yom Kippur, from the Bible. There's only one biblical fast. Listen, if you don't like fasting, I'm not telling you, God forbid, to pick and choose. At least Yom Kippur. That's the one that the Torah says. It happens to be there's another fast coming up this week. The fast of Esther is coming up Tuesday. We fast because the Jews fasted in advance of them going to war against the Persians. They fasted in order to get divine mercy. Many people think we fast because Esther fasted. If we were fasting because Esther fasted, we'd have to fast for 3 days. Some people do that. They do, but they don't do consecutive. They do Monday, Thursday, Monday. Now, says Rabbi Yonoson and Eibushits, listen to this amazing genius, a genius approach. Did the Jews disband with Passover? Did they go ahead and abandon the holiday? How could they do that? So listen to what he says. You won't believe it. He says, they fasted for 3 days. Michael, what does fasting entail? When you have to fast Yom Kippur, what are you not allowed to eat? So think about it. There's a measurement. It's a measurement. The measurement is that technically, according to Torah, you would be in violation of eating if you eat what's called koseves gasa, which means the size of, let's say, a sizable date. Okay? Okay, you got it? Now, that's according to the law of the Torah for Yom Kippur. How much matzah does one need to eat on Passover, Pesach, in order to fulfill his obligation? Well, technically, it's a size, an olive size, which is smaller than the date size. So says Rabbi Yonoson and Eibushits, no problem. They could have fasted 3 days and also fulfilled the mitzvah of Passover, because all they had to have was a zayis, an olive size of matzah, and they're not in violation of breaking the fast, because according to the terminology of a fast, or the measurement of a fast that was predicated on Yom Kippur fast, it had to be something sizable like a date. So they had the best of both worlds. They were able to eat matzah, have the olive size, and they were able to fast on Yom Kippur because they did not have the size of a date. V'tsumo alai, fast for me. Our time is up. Okay, but I implore you, there is so much, so many secrets. We only just the tip of the iceberg. A tiny, minute fraction of the brilliance, of the profundity, the depth of the Torah. So I beg you all to study and study and study. Study more and more. Delve into it, because this is your heirloom. This is your heritage. This is your gift. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening.